With it being the spooky season, I had a fun idea. As we all know, Halloween Horror Nights is a major event in Universal. But what if Disney did their own version of Halloween Horror Nights, but instead of horror characters, we had Disney villains? And I know what you're thinking. That's a little too intense. And admittedly, this isn't the first time Disney's done horror houses. They're actually, if you don't know, in Beijing, in the China location of Disney, there are scare mazes every Halloween, and they do use the Disney IPs. So, wouldn't it be interesting? And to be fair, they're not like completely scared. They're creepy, but they're not like blood and gore scary. If you want to go check out, there's plenty of videos explaining it. But what if Disneyland and Disney World here in America did that? What if we did like a version of that here and had like scare houses, but not really? They'd be more like kind of like walk-arounds. Like they'd be like walk around, you'd see something, and they wouldn't jump out at you. It would be more like, hey, look at this weird thing going on. And yeah, so this is kind of a fun idea I had of what if Disney had their own version of Halloween Horror Nights, but instead call it Villains Night or Villain Nights. Basically, I would have it that Disneyland and Disney World, the Disneyland parks have been taken over by the villains, and each land, like each part of the park, is ruled over by now a different villain. So let's kind of have fun with that. So there are going to be changes for both Disneyland and Disney World in this scenario. So there are going to be like different villains taking over in a different land. So here we go. But both Disneyland and Disney World would both open with this. Like Main Street would, both Main Street parks, area of the park, would be like overrun with like the villains have landed. Like this is like the site of either like a great battle or all their shit's just dumped on the ground like, hey, we're taking over, nothing you can do about it. And I would actually have both castles, both Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty castles, like taken over like overgrown vines from the thorny vines from Disney from Maleficent. So I'd have like the thorny vines have like overtaken the building, both castles. Maybe have like some gargoyles or something on the like some new gargoyles on the tape. Not those gargoyles, like stone gargoyles over them. But basically make Main Street USA look like, yeah, the villains have just kind of like kicked open the door and we won. I would not have a single good character in either area, like any park. No costume Mickey or Minnie or Donald. Just it's all villains. And for the fun of it, I would have, for meet and greet characters, I would have the villains, but for others it would be like lackeys and other Disney villains that didn't get a land. And trust me, there are a lot of costume characters for Disney to use. So yeah, just have like each, like you could have like, if you want to build in the story like they always used to do way back before they just threw IPs at the wall, I would have that there's a reason why these other costume villains are running around, because they helped these other major villains take over. Like I would have it like there's a reason why you're just seeing villains. All the heroes got scared, got basically chased off. And for the Master of Ceremonies, I would have two different ones. For Disneyland, in keeping with Oogie Boogie Bash, I would have Oogie Boogie be the guy who is like the puppeteer behind everything. And on the other end, on Disney World, it'd be Hades. So Hades would be the one greeting everyone, or Oogie Boogie greeting everyone to this Disneyland event, or Disney World event, just Disney event in general. So let's talk about some of like the fun. Let's talk about like I said earlier, of each villain and what you could see in each land, in each area of the park. So let's get started with Tomorrowland. Now, Tomorrowland I had a little problem with because there's not a lot of space villains, and I didn't want to. And at first I thought about using the Star Wars villains, but I was like, no, I want to keep this Disney villain centric. So I had a bit of a problem. There's not a lot of Disney space villains. But there are two. And for each one would be different. Like, So the only two real space villains outside of Star Wars you have are are Emperor Zurg, and I know he's a toy, but you know, counts. It's fun, kitschy stuff, and anyone from Tron, any of the villains from Tron. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have in one Tomorrowland be taken over by Zurg, by Emperor Zurg, and the other one is and Disney World, Disneyland would have Zurg in their Tomorrowland, but Disney World's Tomorrowland would be taken over by the Grid. Like since we are getting a Tron ride at that park. So perfect marketing. I'm thinking, where's my raise? I want to be Disney's new CEO. Fuck you, Chapek. Anyway, so I wouldn't have Clue. I know Clue fits more with that era of Tron, but like for fun, I would have the Master Controller, like a big hologram image of the Master Controller. Maybe have Shark there, or Clue. You could have Clue there too from Tron Legacy, and I would have like the guards kind of like move through the crowds and stuff like that. Give like more like have Daft Punk music playing throughout the area. And basically give more like the Grid has come to Tomorrowland, and perfect place you can put the Scare House. Literally where they put Extraterrestrial or Stitch's Great Escape. That room is not being used for anything other than a meet and greet room, and there's enough space to put in a Scare House there. So, and you could definitely do some cool stuff with the Tron experience. I could definitely see Disney playing with like lights and holograms. Just totally awesome. So yeah, I would have that either you could have the Master Controller or Clue have taken over that area of Tomorrowland, but at Disneyland, Emperor Zurg. Yeah, Emperor Zurg would be the one who took over Tomorrowland, and I would have like the Hornets, I think that's what they're called, marching around, and his scare zone would be more like you're on the planet Zurg, and seeing like giant puppet monsters or animatronic creatures come at you. Emperor Zurg himself would be like and I would love to see. I don't think they've done a costumed Emperor Zurg at all. I don't think they have done it, so it'd be kind of cool to see that. Anyway, so there's my Tomorrowland. Now, let's talk about Frontierland. Now, there isn't really much of a Frontierland over at Disney World, but Disneyland does have a Frontierland, and how I would so it would be again like. There'd be different villains for different parks, so it also kind of makes the experience doesn't like copy and paste. So let's talk about Disney Worlds real quick. Disney World Frontierland is more known as like Liberty Square. So intuit that when this idea kind of hit, the first and only villain that came to me to go with Frontierland was the Headless Horseman. Yeah, it makes so much sense. He's part of that lore and mythology. He's part of that era. He ties in perfectly. I know someone's going to say, oh, what about Jack Skellington, Haunted Mansion and all that. As much as I love Night Before Christmas, if I had to say in this, each part, or like, I want each of the villains to like feel like they belong there. And Headless Horseman does belong there. And there is like, people know the Headless Horseman regardless, even if you haven't seen the Ichabod and Mr. Toad attraction. Or the movie, excuse me. So people know the Headless Horseman. They still use the Headless Horseman and Not So Scary. So I would say the Headless Horseman would be perfect for Disney World as he took over. Like, I wouldn't say like there's a head, like his scare zone would be like a head, like people's heads are cut off. But I would have it like it looks like every night looks like All Hallows Eve in the colonial era. Like have pumpkins out. Have stuff like that, and have the Headless Horseman just riding around with his sword out. Something like that. Now, for Disneyland, their Frontierland is a lot more out west, is more western. So that one was a little more harder to do. Like, that one was a little more harder to think of who to use for the Frontierland for Disneyland. And no, I know I am not using the big yodeling dumbass from Home on the Range. That movie killed the 2D animation over there. But I will say, that over in Frontierland there is a thing called New Orleans Square. Like, there's a Liberty Square, there's a New Orleans Square over in Disneyland. And who else better for New Orleans Square than Dr. Facilier? Yeah, so having that Dr. Facilier is taken over. You could literally do so much with his scare zone. Like, the spirits, shadows, be perfect. So Dr. Facilier would be the one for that version of Frontierland. Fantasyland was a hard one because there's so many fantasy-based villains. It's kind of hard to think like who you could have running that part. But really, it came down to two. Disneyland, you get the evil queen. You've already, well, actually Maleficent, since we already have Sleeping Beauty's castle over there in Disneyland. So Maleficent would be over at Disneyland. The evil queen would be the one taking over the Fantasyland in Disney World. You know, have that. So those would be those two. They'd also be different experiences too. Like, I would just love to see what they would do for a haunted house for both characters. That'd be great. I mean, you already took away Snow White's Scary Adventure, so this would more than make up for it. Anyway, so we finally come to Adventureland, and Adventureland was actually really hard. Like, there were so many villains to really pick from. But really, I thought about it and, like, this makes sense. Like, Adventureland does have Pirates of the Caribbean. So, if you want... And that IP is still really popular. So, honestly, Adventureland it makes sense to have a Pirates of the Caribbean villain as the one who took over that area. So... But which villains? So... I would say Barbossa for Barbossa for Disneyland. You would have that villain, and I could just imagine what they would do with having the cursed pirates come at you. That'd be great. And for Disney World, it'd be Davy Jones. Those are the two most popular. I love Blackbeard. I do like Blackbeard, but that movie doesn't really get the best reception. So I would say Barbossa for Disneyland. Disney World gets Davy Jones, and I would really love to see what they would do with, like, the monster, like the sea monster crew members for, like, a haunted house. Hell, you could probably put them in the ride. Like you could put them in the Disneyland, because they've done live actors in the Pirates of the Caribbean, so wouldn't it be kind of fun to have, like, you're going through the part of the dark ride where it's all like skeletons and bones and you're dead men tell no tales, and like a cursed pirate or one of Davy Jones' crew members like come at you from just pop out from behind the rocks. That'd be fun. So yeah, would I still have the trick-or-treat trails? Obviously, you got to get those kids pumped for stuff. But this is sadly never going to happen. Now, honestly, this may have happened. This no doubt in my mind if Michael Eisner was still the CEO of Disney. I'm pretty sure and seeing how popular Halloween Horror Nights became, I guarantee you there'd be something like this at Disney today. But we don't have that, so yeah. Anyway, so you guys tell me in the comments below, what do you guys think what if Disney did their own version of Halloween Horror Nights? Would you guys, how would you guys do that? What kind of villains would you use? What kind of, like, story would you want to have? Just comment below, let me know. Once again, hope you all enjoyed this. I thought this would be a fun way to kick off Halloween, the Halloween season. And yeah, as always, if you haven't already, go check out my Patreon. And hit the link below if you want your own videos to get Patreon requests. Greatly appreciate it. And yeah, other than that, I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.